What is up, guys? It is Robert Rule of 2 Review, and today EA finally starts talking about bringing us more Star Wars games. All right, well, I have to say that today is a pretty great day overall for many reasons. It is a wonderful, beautiful, sunny day here in Denver. I've got the window in my recording room open. I never get to do that in the middle of the day. Just kind of one of those beautiful, wonderful things that sort of worked out. For anyone who doesn't live in Denver, which I'm going to assume is most of you, what you probably don't know is, yes, it's a nice, sunny spring day here in the end of March 2014. But I'll tell you what, in Denver, you never know what's going to happen. We probably have several more weeks of snow. So it's going to be snowing into April and possibly even May. I'm pretty sure it was snowing in May last year. It can go from 80 degrees one day to negative 10 the next day here in Denver. And that's just kind of the way it is, you know? We love those Rocky Mountains, but curse them. Also, really quickly, what you'll probably notice as the game footage you're watching today is Diablo 3, and it is the Reaper of Souls expansion. Really, all you're seeing in the gameplay right now, because I only just started it, it released last night at midnight / today, March 25th. All you're able to really do is kind of restart the game from Act 1 and before you can get to the brand new story mode elements, which is it's like a Nephilim mission, you know, all this extra good stuff that only happens after you complete the final act of the actual game. But what I am doing is playing as the brand new Crusader class. So that's what you're watching a little bit of. Again, very early levels, you know, 4, 5, 6, something like that is about probably what you're seeing. So it's just the very, very beginning, not a very wide move set. But beyond the fact that they added a Crusader class and a brand new class to the game, which is awesome. The Crusader, by the way, kicks ass. So far, nothing really impressive in the special moveset, but as far as his actual and regular left click melee attack, it's awesome. He has a lot of power right out of the gate, so that's pretty cool, and I'm enjoying him so far. But they also did many other improvements to the game overall. The UI and the online connection experience. The loot system is 1,000 times better than it was before, and I always loved Diablo 3 since it launched, but I definitely recognize that the way they've improved it now is phenomenal. There's so many different improvements. The game is significantly more balanced. It's more fun than it's ever been. It's running better. It looks the same, of course, but from what I understand, the extra Nephilim act that happens again after the final act of the regular game Diablo 3, that apparently is a much darker tone. So I'm really excited to get there and see what that's like. And by the time I get there, I might do a review, but I'll definitely do a whole episode dedicated just to that. So hopefully in the next couple of days, I can finally get there. So anyway, I'm going to move on to EA and to Star Wars. So for the rest of the video, enjoy some awesome Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls Crusader footage. And so another fantastic reason that today is awesome is because I finally have a reason, again, it's been a while, to talk about Star Wars, and specifically Star Wars in the gaming space. If you know me or if you follow the videos, of course, and I always have to reiterate this, I am a gigantic, massive Star Wars fan. It is my number one thing. Anything about the films, the novels, the expanded universe, the games, I love it. So I eat it all up. I think it's all fantastic. We live in a great time with a brand new trilogy getting ready to kick off at the end of next year, so it's a really, really cool thing that's going on. Now, of course, what we do know is a lot's been happening with Lucasfilm and the Star Wars brand, period, the last couple of years. George Lucas retired, unfortunately. Even though he deserved it, he sold Lucasfilm. This is regrettable to Disney, and I love Disney regularly, but when it comes to Star Wars, not so much. But that's aside. That's not important here. Lucasfilm went to Disney, and eventually LucasArts got closed down by Disney, and then eventually EA, Electronic Arts, picked back up the licensing rights for Star Wars video games. And I believe it's a 10-year contract. So from what we know, as of right now, it was 2013 when this deal was made, for 10 years, only EA is able to make and produce Star Wars games. We know that EA and DICE are making Battlefront 3, which is fucking badass. They've also talked about a new, like an open world kind of game, which I spent a lot of time on in a very, very popular video specifically about that one topic a couple months ago. I will link that below, so please go and check it out because there's a lot of good info in that video. So we know that that's going to be coming. There's a rumor, according to IGN, that I guess that might be happening with Visceral Games, who's responsible for Dead Space. So really cool if that's the case. I actually am really excited for that concept. And so now here we get a new, not announcement, but basically kind of an idea, something that an EA representative has finally kind of let loose and started talking about just a little bit. And what they did was, it's kind of really just a theoretical kind of idea. And what they said is they kind of want to model the Star Wars games that they're going to be creating, at least initially, off of kind of what Warner Brothers did with the Batman universe, with the Arkham universe that they created for Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, and Arkham Origins, and of course moving forward with Arkham Knight coming out, I think this year. And I also made a video about that. I'll link that below as well. So that's very interesting. Here I'm going to read the quote, and then as the huge Star Wars fan and huge gamer, I'm just going to talk about my feelings for a couple minutes and see what you guys think. So here is the quote. I don't think I have exactly which person from EA said this. No, I do not see this person's name. But, oh, yes, it is. It's Andrew Wilson, who is the CEO, who's a CEO for EA. And he told this to Fortune Tech. And what he says is, this is quote, "What Warner Brothers did with Batman was take the core roots of that IP and manifest that inside the walls of Gotham City and delivered an interactive experience that had real ties to what you would see in the films and what you would read in the comics, while having its own life because it could provide such deep and more immersive storylines." Okay, not bad. He goes on to say, "When we look at the Star Wars properties, that's how we're looking at it. We're not trying to build a game that replicates the storyline of any particular film." End quote. Okay, so overall, that's pretty cool stuff. There are still some things that I don't entirely love about it, and I guess I'll kind of get into that. It should be noted that I've talked about this a couple times. I like the Batman Arkham games. I don't love them. Like a lot of people just went head over heels in love with them. I get why they're great. And I love Batman because I am no fool. So don't get me wrong. Batman is awesome. And those games are awesome too. Those are good games. But they just didn't like blow me away, and I didn't get super invested in them like a lot of folks did. And a lot of my best friends did. And probably you. If you did, that makes sense. I totally get it. They're really cool games. The combat system was phenomenal. So when I initially read this headline before I actually read the article, again, that's posted on IGN, and I'll link that below as well. When I initially read the title, I thought that what they were getting at, and this had me a little bit nervous at first, was that they were going to make the games play similarly to the Arkham games. And while I can admit that those Arkham games play phenomenally, I love the combat system while playing as Batman in Gotham City, I didn't necessarily want that out of a Star Wars action game. It's a very different feeling universe. It's a sci-fi universe, and even though, yes, it takes place a long time ago, it's still a futuristic feel. I mean, that's just what Star Wars is. Yes, it's in the past, but it's futuristic, and we just know that. So I didn't want it to really, borrow from that mold of gameplay and action from those games. So that made me a little bit nervous. But reading the idea of what they're doing, as opposed to borrowing really just the structure and the model that Warner Brothers did with Batman, that to me resonates a little bit more closely, and I appreciate that a lot more. Again, I don't fully love it for a few reasons. Here are the reasons why I still have some issues, and I hope that some other things play out differently. Is honestly, there's two things. One is I love the films. I love all 6 current films, and I am pooping my pants in anticipation for episodes 7, 8, and 9. So I love the films. The film universe is why I'm a Star Wars fan, and no matter what you may think or say with so much Star Wars lore out there, it really is the reason you're a Star Wars fan too. It started with the films. It's the films. It's George Lucas's story, his characters he created and gave to us over 20, 25 years. And that's why Star Wars exists and why it's awesome. Granted, all the extra surplus stuff is also awesome. But because I love the films, I kind of don't want that to have to go away in gaming just because they already exist as films, The Clone Wars TV show and the upcoming Rebels TV show is a really good example of how you can still tell amazing and engaging stories framed around the storyline of the films. The Clone Wars works. Also, one of my favorite novels ever, which is Shadows of the Empire, takes place. So Clone Wars is between episodes 2 and 3. Shadows of the Empire between episodes 5 and 6. So it's between Empire and Jedi, where Han Solo's frozen in carbonite the entire time. You get to know Dash Rendar, who was an old friend/foe of him. Very similar relationship to what Han seems to have with Lando. It's really cool, man. And you know what? Those are fantastic periods. Ultimately, the Old Republic, yeah, I love it. Everyone loves the Old Republic. Hooray. That's cool. We've been doing that in games for a while now, so I don't think it's a bad thing to maybe step away from the Old Republic. So whatever, that's a little bit tired. I love the New Jedi Order. Sure. But you know what? I also kind of just want to sometimes get some stuff that happens during the films. Add to the lore that Lucas created with those films. That's really exciting with things like Clone Wars and Shadows of the Empire. I think that there's a lot of potential there. And while I'm not saying that I don't like the idea of them trying, especially focusing on these first few games, like he said, what was the quote? Not trying to replicate storyline in any particular film. I certainly appreciate that. But what I don't want them to do is throw out the idea of making stuff that comes in line with the films outright. Because again, there's tons of stories that you can still tell. You are so lucky and blessed, Electronic Arts, to now have access to the Star Wars property. You should take advantage of it in as many possible facets as you can without doing the wrong things and hopefully without making shitty games. We can always dream that, but you never know. I actually like EA, and I know that that's a very polarizing topic because a lot of people, most people in the industry, sorry, not in the industry, gamers. People in the industry seem to understand they're a fine company, but of course, gamers, we're a bitter, jaded, hateful bunch sometimes, and everyone just gets down on EA. Honestly, they've never really done me too wrong. I like them, and it was one of the few good things that happened since Lucasfilm went to Disney was when EA picked up the rights for Star Wars games. That's great. So I was really excited. Now, so that's the one reason why I don't necessarily love the idea of what EA is trying to do here. The other reason why I have maybe a slight bit of trepidation when it comes to this as well is when they talk about trying to borrow from that Batman model and doing stuff, again, not coming in line with any particular film or the film universe per se. What I'm worried about is how it's going to fit into the canon. And if they're trying to make stuff up outright that really just doesn't have to relate to anything previously established in any of the lore, whether it's film or expanded universe or otherwise, because as we know, that has become considered all the same canon for the most part. There's a few small exceptions with like some of the Visionaries stuff, but overall, it's the exact same storyline we're reading, we're watching, we're experiencing and playing. I mean, that's always been that way. And I love that. It's one huge cohesive universe that starts with and is centered around George Lucas's film universe. And so it's like the way the Batman model works, and it's definitely a little bit different in that universe because it's a comic book universe it's based off of, so there is that much more slack to kind of play around with the timelines and the universes you're in. But within the Batman universe, I mean, the Arkham stuff is like, it's not the same as the movies. It's like, that's a different guy, that's a different Bruce Wayne, that's a different Gotham City, it's a different Batman story, it's a different everything. Characters, but in completely different settings, unrelating to the most recent Dark Knight films. And then, of course, Tim Burton's Batman films, and then the old Batman TV show, and then the original Batman comics. It's like everything is its own unique thing. And Star Wars doesn't really work that way. As I just said, it is one cohesive, unified thing. And that's what's great about it. So in talking about borrowing Warner Brothers' Batman model for Star Wars, I just hope that doesn't mean that they create these games in this universe that is this random nebulous Star Wars universe that doesn't have shit diddly to do with anything previously. And, just because they're trying to not make it around the timeline of the film or talk about the characters from the films, I hope that doesn't mean they're also going to take it so far as to mean it's totally separate from the entire last 30 some odd years established universe of Star Wars between films, games, books, and comics. And granted, they might not do that. And even if they did, if they still make a good game, yes, that is what's going to be most important overall. And as I just said, yes, I honestly believe they will and can make some pretty good Star Wars games. But I just don't want it to become this muddled mess and to start to confuse the storylines and keep itself separate. I don't want anything within the Star Wars universe, personally as a fan. You may feel differently, but this is my fan opinion. I don't want any of that stuff to alienate itself from other stuff. I like the whole unified, cohesive universe of Star Wars and all the lore and the mythos of it, and I don't want that to necessarily start being segregated just because now Disney is this whole new entity that's come into the mix, and now they've invited EA into the mix, and they're doing their own thing, and everyone's their own entity just trying to get a piece of the Star Wars pie, which I get. I just don't want anything to get too confused. My theory is that won't happen, just so you know. I am optimistic that that's not going to happen, but I think that I could also maybe see it happening, and it's just something that I don't want, I mean, you guys, I guess, can tell me what you think if you're a big Star Wars fan, and if you have any opinions on this, if you like the idea of EA making games or not, what you think of this news about them borrowing the Warner Brothers model from Batman. I ultimately think it's pretty cool. At the end of the day, I think that there's a lot of potential for them to do cool things. EA is a huge studio with a lot of money and a lot of really talented people working for them. If we have both DICE and Visceral Games working on different kinds of Star Wars games, that already is amazing news. They did the right thing by reinvigorating Battlefront. Thank fucking God. That is so cool, man. And so because they're making smart decisions, smarter than Disney is in my opinion, then I feel like they're going to probably do maybe some of the right things going forward, even with this idea, So, I expressed some of my concerns, but ultimately I've got faith. I feel pretty good about it. I love my Star Wars. I support EA. I think that they're probably going to do the right things, but regardless, it's certainly going to be really exciting to see how it all plays out. Alrighty, guys. Well, that's it for the Star Wars and Electronic Arts video game news for today. What a pretty kick-ass March day it is. Of course, if you like what I'm doing here at Rule of Two Review, you can feel free to subscribe, like, and share the video, or share your comments and your thoughts about the subject below. Of course, you can find this video and lots of other great gaming content on freeforgeeks.com. Also, links to that and their podcast, the Free For All podcast below. So there you go. Of course, as always, thank you so much for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you next time.